Next up, we have a talk called Year with Browser Library. And with the maximum amount of noise, let's bring onto the stage Tatu, René, and Kerkko.
Thank you. Yes, hello. We are.
Hi, my name is Tatu Aalto.
I'm Kerkko Pelttari.
And I'm René Rohner, this time in my role of Imbus, not of Foundation. So, we are the developers of Robot Framework Browser. And the fourth developer, Mikko Korpela, is not here because he's on a mission outside, on a training, doing some fun stuff. And we have to be here also doing some fun stuff.
Yeah.
And we would like to start with some news about Browser Library. So some background, Browser Library was a project that started in May 2020 after the lockdown started and we were all sitting at home and not really bored, but hungry for new ideas. So we started that new library. And in June 2020, we released the first version to try out on PyPy. In August 2020, we released the 1.0 as a first major release. And we said, now we are ready, you can use it. It actually happened that some people started using it in production and, of course, complained, but also brought a lot of good ideas. Since the very beginning, we had 71 releases. And since last RoboCon, we had 31 releases. And as you may see, I think last RoboCon we were at 4.0, right? Something like this,
Yep.
for something. So we are now at 12.4 with some major releases 3 days ago. OK. Let's start with the first news.
Yeah, as you yesterday learned that how to find the thing that you need to fix first, I'm here to talk about a little about the browser library. How do you figure out how to fix it? And this is a Robot Framework log file. It's screaming red, as like my yesterday's presentation. That this is what you get default. But this is way better. It has more details. And when you think that it's a problem in the browser library, this is what I want to see. I want to see the full stack trace. It tells me actually which keywords you're running, where the code is running. Unfortunately, we don't see in this view what happens in the node side, but it's available. And it gives us a better understanding. And it also might be useful for you, because you kind of see what kind of things happens. And you get it when you add that log level trace thing. And I think that's the most copy-paste thing that I ever paste in the Slack or whatever I'm discussing. And you get better details. It's a nice thing to have. But then what about the node side? There is stuff. In default, you get playwright_log.txt file in the output directory, which logs stuff that happens in the node cycle. And it's there by default. And there's that enable playwright debug thing. And if you put it as a true, you get also more detailed information, what the playwright API is actually doing there. And it's only available as an import flag, because playwright controls that by an environment variable. Funny enough, but that's how it works. So this is what you see by the default. There's a kind of like end and start keyword things. And there's nice things what we decide to log from the node side. And there's also exceptions. In this time, the locator click exceeded. It looks a little bit same as what you see in the stack trace also, but this has a little bit more context. And this is what you get when you enable the playwright debugging logs. It's a little bit in different format, but you see that the clicking started, there's a selector that you enabled, and there's a better and longer error exception messages. But worth of noting, because I work in the security, everything in this file, especially in the playwright log level, is in plain text. All the secrets, they're out there. So when you send this to me or my other teammates, take out the secret stuff, please. Yeah, and I understand if it's a really long text, you cannot send it all. The interesting part is like that start keyword and then the exception, and that's usually enough. The best part is that I want to example that I can run also, but that is, I understand that that is not always possible. And these are the kind of like the two basic building blocks that I want to see when I'm debugging some problems from new people. But what about when you think that it's not actually a problem in our library, that happens. There's this tracing configuration that allows you to do wonderful things. It's configured in the new context keyword, and you basically define a path, a zip file, where you put those traces. And then you execute a test as you would execute any normal robot framework tests. And then there's two ways to show when that execution is done. There's two ways to view the trace files. Playwright actually has built a website where you can drag and drop that zip file, and it looks pretty cool. But I haven't looked what that site actually does, so again, as a security person, be careful. But they say that everything happens in your browser and should be safe. And also there's a command, so trace -f full path to the zip file, and then it opens your local browser where you see something like this. And it's a really handy tool. First of all, it looks like that network tab or browser developed tools. There's a timeline where you can drag your mouse over and you can see different kind of actions, what did happen in which part of the test. And you can see all the Playwright API calls. They are not keyword calls that are executed. You cannot differentiate which keyword execute that thing, but at least you have a very good idea which kind of Playwright API actions your tests are calling. And then you see, not in every Playwright action, but most of the Playwright action has this like a picture about the application. And there's also there's before and after the action, so you can actually compare what was different in the page. It's a really cool thing. And then there's this network tab, which is similar that you get from the browser network tab. You see all the requests and responses that happen in your application. You can expand them, so you can see the headers and all the stuff that happens in the browser. And it really helps to debug your applications. And there are a few other tabs. There's that metadata tab that tells you that how that browser and context were configured. It's really useful because sometimes that's really fuzzy and you don't see that. You hide it in the variables and you set it from the command line. You don't actually remember. I don't either. And this is other thing, because we don't always we default some variables, or there might be some that we haven't exposed as arguments from the robot frameworks. We can actually see how that Playwright API method was called. And it really helps you that perhaps you want to play with those variables. And it's a really nice and powerful tool. And it's really helped me when I try to figure out what the heck the Playwright API is actually doing, or Playwright library is doing. It's really powerful. But it takes a lot of disk space, so if disk space costs for you, be careful. It's like the video thing. It consumes quite a lot of space. And there, Kerkko, secret hiding.
Thank you. So, like you said, Tatu, there can be situations where you have information in your test data that you don't want to allow to get into the logs. This does not actually protect you from things going into the Playwright debug log. So even if you are doing this, then you should ensure that you are not using the enable Playwright debug flag while running your tests if you, for example, don't want any secrets in your log files on your CI. But in normal cases, where the place where you want to hide the secrets from is the robot log, well, there is this funny thing that robot framework does a lot of good logging, and usually that is what you want. But then when you are inputting things like passwords, you would prefer them not to be logged at all. So for these sorts of cases, we have built this fill secret keyword, which takes the variable in with this different syntax from the usual robot framework syntax. So you need to put it like just the $ and a variable name, and then robot framework won't resolve the secret, but instead the library will internally resolve the secret while taking care to avoid running any robot framework loggings during this. But again, I emphasize that if you are using the debug logs, then remember to scrub all sensitive data away from those as well.
And be aware we will deprecate the usage of normal plain text keywords with that keyword, so it will then just fail in the future.
Yeah.
So it's already deprecated, already warns you. So if you want to use a normal variable, just fill text,
yeah,
not fill secrets. So.
Yep. So then into strict mode. So what is strict mode? We have a automation case like this, where I have written some code, and I'm planning to make my bot buy some RoboCon tickets. And I have an open robocon.io, then a click a.ticket container, and then buy ticket. But there is a certain problem with this. If you haven't written this code, you might not yet realize the problem. But when we run this code, with default settings, browser library gives you a strict mode violation exception. The reason this comes up is because it is highlighting that there are two elements that the selector a.ticket container matches. There is the online ticket and the in-person ticket. So this strict mode is a feature that is on by default in Robot Framework browser, and it allows you to globally assert that when you use selectors, they only hit single elements. So whenever you're using the Robot Framework browser with the default settings, this is on. That means that when you use a selector, if there's no error, you can be pretty confident that it's not matching multiple elements. And why is a single selector matching multiple elements bad? Well, that's because then it's up to the page, up to the order of elements, up to the library implementation, which element is selected. For example, in the previous case, if you don't have a unique selector, it might buy either of these tickets. You don't usually want that. You know which ticket you want, so then the library makes you code that in. Then there are two ways to disable the strict mode. You can use the set strict mode keyword, or you can use a library import argument. The first example was of the set strict mode, and this is the library import one. Then we have another new feature that we actually started coding only during the sprints, because we had earlier figured that there would be technical problems with it. So it is this thing called persistent context. So by default, Playwright executes let me go back. By default, Playwright executes tests in an isolated browser where no state is, or all the state is stored in a temporary directory, temporary files, and they are deleted on exit. This is usually useful because it ensures that your automation has a clean environment to run, but this does mean that things like extensions do not function normally. So for that reason, there is this special type of persistent context that runs. It can also run in a temporary directory, or it can run in an existing directory, for example, in your browser state. And even though the name says persistent, normally if you just want to persist things like a login state in your tests, please still use the storage state keyword. So if you do not have specific needs for a browser profile or extensions, then this save storage state keyword is usually what you want. But then if you need extensions or like browser profile settings, then the persistent context is the correct keyword to call. So and the extensions are only supported in Chrome or Chromium and only in headful browsers. And now we have an example of a page where I wrote some robot script. So it is now opening up a news page from a Finnish news agency. So that's really annoying. Let's click that the advertisement pop-up away. Well, the page is still pretty annoying because you can't actually see what is the content and what is the ads. So let's make the test load ad blocker like uBlock Origin. Now it's much better. So, and this is quite simple code. So there's just you need to fetch the extension. You can't install it real time from the Chrome store. You need to download the zip and then load it using the browser startup args. But otherwise, then you can just run your test like normal in that context, using all the extensions you want. And then we can move on to execute JavaScript.
Yeah, thank you. We made some more deprecations, so I'm now the bad messenger who tells you what keyword you should not use in the future. But there are good news. We have replacements for that. So first new feature, we replaced the name of execute JavaScript and call it now evaluate JavaScript. Woo! No one laughs, okay. Okay, we have also other features. We switched the arguments, so now the locator is not the second one, but the first one. Woo! I think we have to bring up more. Okay, let's see the argument interface. So, okay, what do we have? We have the selector first. Then we have function, but there is a little star before. That means it can get multiple arguments as a function. not as multiple functions, but as one function. So you can use multiple argument strings. Why that is good, I can show you on the next slide. We have also the arg one, so you can add additional data into that JavaScript function, like a dictionary, a long table or something. You do not want to get like a statement as string and then interpret it as list or something like this. Then we have as next flag for all elements, which means basically if that first selector finds multiple elements, you're not handing over one JavaScript element into that JavaScript code, but a list of elements. So you can, for example, write some JavaScript code that runs over all your buttons of the page and change something. Where you before had to make a for loop outside this evaluate thing and evaluate multiple JavaScripts, now you can do it inside. So what's the cool thing with these multiple functions? This JavaScript functions is a function that takes an element, which should be part of a table, and that searches upwards the DOM, finds the table row, stores it, goes upwards more to the table, and then calculate which table row is it within that table. That's not complex JavaScript code, but it's not short. Imagine you have to do that JavaScript code in one line. That's no problem, but I think RoboCon would not like that. So it would kind of a long line, and line breaks you cannot make within one argument. So the cool thing is here, you can make a new line all the time, and then write your JavaScript code here as a robot keyword. If you do not like that, you can also make a JavaScript extension like Aalto showed with accessibility testing for browser. Next up, regarding tables and finding which table row am I working with, we have these table keywords. So I know HTML tables are not so often used as in the past, but still they are there and they are still annoying. We had also, like I think last month, again a discussion about how do I find a specific element in the table and then do something in the same row or so, and it's always awful because you are always somehow index based. You cannot just say give me the same row of something. You find an index of a row, then you work with that index in the next step. It's just not good. And let's imagine we would like to compare two elements in a table and, for example, check the stars of these two libraries. So what we want to do, we want to get the stars of browser library and get the stars of Selenium library. And with a new table keyword, you can just say, give me the element that is in the column of stars and in the same row of browser. So you basically do not have to count any indexes. You can also say, give me the row 5. But you can also just say, give me the row where the element browser library is in, and give me, please, the row in the column index where the element where stars as title is in. And then you get the cross element there. You get basically the TD element in that table, and then you can do a get text on that one, which is pretty handy. You can also just say, okay, give me stars, and then give me the element, give me name of the element that has 269 stars, and it would spit out browser library. So it does not necessarily be any kind of header. So these are the three keywords we have. So get table cell element, which returns that handle to the web element. We have then these other two helper keywords. Regarding the arguments, first you select the table, and then these two elements are relative to that table. So they must be children of that table to work. The get table cell index can also be an assertion. So you get a specific index horizontally, or get row index would be an index vertically. So that works something like this. So you get the table cell element of browser library, get the text, so you get the browser stars. Then you do the same thing with the other library and get the other stars. And here in this example, you see how AI works. This is GitHub Copilot, which is an artificial intelligence that make code recommendations you want to write. And I wrote, OK, should be true, and started with $1. And then literally that happened 2 weeks ago. Copilot recommended, hey, so browser stars should be greater than Selenium stars. I said, yeah, that's a good recommendation. I take that. And then wait a second. And then I was impressed, but GitHub said, okay, hold my beer. And then I want to write an error message if that goes wrong, and I just hit B, and that appeared. So browser library should have more stars than Selenium library. I totally agree. We are not there yet. So I think 3 weeks ago or so, we had still just 888 stars to go. So please go on GitHub now, like browser library. Don't unstar the Selenium library. It's still pretty good. So, and we will contribute, I think, also to Selenium library in the future as well. OK, that's regarding the table keywords. We also made a new change. getElementState is deprecated because we wanted to add an S. So, woo! OK. OK, what is getElementStates? So we deprecate the first one. We will delete it somewhere in the future. No worries. Under the hood, it already uses the new one. So getElementState, what you're currently using, is just using getElementStates. The cool feature of getElementStates is you can assert or get all the states of a specific element. So if it's visible, editable, read-only, and so on at the same time. So from refactoring-wise, you do not say, I want the read-only argument or the read-only state and check if it's false or true. I just say, OK, H1 should not contain the state read-only. And you could also do multiple things. So please get the element states of the ID password thing, and it should contain these states, visible, editable, and enabled. And therefore, you can assert a specific state of an element. These are the states that are possible. By default, they are returned as a list of strings by the getter. You can set that to be returned as int flags. So what are int flags? Let's imagine an element has these states. You see these states are the positive and negative states, and either the one or the other is active if it is applicable to that specific keyword element. So let's see, we have these states. Now we put their binary mask on top, and then we get this as an int flag, and we have this super cool number, 18,517. We directly know what state that element has.
Clear.
Kind of. OK, we would return that list like attached, visible, enabled, editable. But what we can do with this int flag, we can do assertions again. So we could say getElementStates contains visible, editable, enabled, which then matches that and checks, yes, that's pass. That basically internally we do with a set comparison, so not with the int flags, but these then or evaluate or validate closures we have in browser library, where you then can make Python code, you can use to filter these states. And here happens something that is interesting. So if you look in the first line at the top, you've seen these two green things. There is a binary OR operator, which means the one or the other can be true. So we are kind of building a mask here, which is the second line. So everything 0 except of these two ones. And then we say, OK, the value, which is basically what is returned by getElementState, is ended, so with an end binary operator with that mask, which means in the end, this statement at the top would either return visible or return hidden, but not attached and all the others. So you can directly get that and work with that kind of filter information. So that can also hand out very handy. That's it so far from us. We have some good ideas for the future, but we would really like you to bring your good ideas for the future. So what do you like? What do you not like? What are your feature requests? So please raise issues. If you like, for example, to work with our documentation, we were super happy if somebody would raise a pull request regarding docs. Nice examples or something like this. I know doc pull requests are easier than making code pull requests. So please help us with the docs, for example. And you can contact us in Slack. Best would be in the #browser channel. You can also find all information about browser library on the robotframework-browser.org or browserlibrary.org, or just, I learned today, browser.fi. also leads to us. So yeah, come visit us, and we are now here for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. First question, which library is better, Selenium or browser?
Woo! Wrong!
Browser.
Yeah, that's the only one that works. Here we are just for fun here.
And the next question, I think you kind of answered it, but I'm still going to ask it. Any plans to base this on Playwright? So what I understood, you're kind of using Playwright already.
Well, yes, very much.
Yeah. But this was maybe
No. This is the question if it's based on Playwright Python. At the moment, browser library is based on the TypeScript Playwright implementation, and there is a Playwright Python implementation that, on the other hand, also communicates with the Node side of Playwright. So it wouldn't bring that much advantage for us.
To end users, really.
It would definitely bring a little bit possibilities to make more Python keywords, but it would also bring us the great honor of completely rewriting everything. And no, technology-wise, we definitely stay there. We thought about it, but we decided not to go with, and definitely stay with the Node side.
Excellent. Can browser library be used to parse static HTML files? I guess so.
Yes.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Parse static, I would use XML library.
You can render them.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Most of our tests are running in static files.
Yeah. Anything like Selenium Grid on the horizon for a browser library?
There is a Selenium Grid kind of tutorial, or the Playwright dev said Selenium Grid can be used because Grid is not tied to Selenium itself. Grid is just a moderator between some nodes and someone who needs to connect to that node. Therefore, it should be possible. I have not. You haven't tried it?
No, but
okay,
if you
I've
have a need, come raise the issue.
Yeah, so we know that it should be possible with Playwright. They say it's possible. We never tried it with browser library, actually.
There's too many things to try that somebody has to give a little bit guidance.
Yeah, but please try it and tell us.
Yes.
Next isn't really a question, it's more like a compliment on the presentation. Really good CGI in the presentation, people like that.
Thanks to René.
How much money have you spent on marketing and why it's zero?
Thank you. I think because we spent all our money in Kerkko and a very little bit of money in Tatu. So that was the only. Jani Harkkonen. So that was the initial RoboCorp funding that was spent there, and then my employer and Mikko's employer. Yeah, because it sells its own. That's the correct answer.
If you build a good product, you don't need marketing. Like Tesla. Which state is equivalent to number 42?
Attached. Yeah.
Everything.
But that would be actually, I have to calculate that. There will be one.
My calculator.
One more, or actually two more questions. Regarding strict mode, which ticket is bought then, online or the other one? I think this is...
That was the on-site one, actually, because the first one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have to specify it more, but without strict mode, it would be the on-site, the first one.
Yeah.
Currently.
Yeah, maybe we switch.
Then the last question, which is, I think, the best question. Can we get another woo once more?
Another woo?
Woo! Yes. Thank you guys for the presentation.
But I would like to... So,
thank you.
Is that 100%? Come on, guys.
Guys.
Now we are talking.
Thank you. Thank you.